In this module, we will cover the many different features of the antivirus component. We will cover some of the terminology, heuristic detection, sandboxing, botnets, proxy and flow-based scanning, and some other topics. By the end of this module, you should be able to identify various conserve mode conditions, define the scanning techniques used on a FortiGate, understand the differences between flow-based and proxy-based scanning, configure antivirus scanning, update the virus databases through FortiGuard, set up grayware as well as heuristic scanning, submit an unknown virus sample to Fortinet, and describe the order of operations involved in virus scanning. Back in the early 80s, anything malicious was considered a virus. As time went on, this classification proved to be inaccurate, so the term malware was developed. Some people still use those terms interchangeably, which is incorrect. Malware is now the umbrella term used to describe any software that makes unauthorized changes to the computer. There are two types of malware: viruses, which infect the computer and spread on their own, and grayware, which requires some kind of user interaction in order to actually infect. As a simple comparison, you can turn your computer on and do nothing, and it can become infected with a virus. Whereas with grayware, it will not be infected unless you actually start doing things manually. Malware can make use of various evasion techniques in order to avoid detection. The payload can be encrypted to prevent direct reading of the code, but has limited effectiveness since many times it's encrypted the same way, which can allow for detection anyway. Two methods of evasion which are much harder to detect are polymorphic and metamorphic. Polymorphic means that the software will encrypt itself with a different key each time it is transmitted. Metamorphic means the payload itself, the code, will rewrite itself with each new infection. Both of these methods require that the software include an engine that accompanies the payload. This greatly increases the size and complexity of the virus. Depending on the behavior of the malware, it can also be described differently. This list is not comprehensive, but it does contain many of the most common things that malware does. Most people are familiar with the terms spyware and adware. Ransomware is something fairly new where the software essentially holds the computer hostage until money is paid. Rootkits attempt to gain root user access. These can be hard to detect because if they are successful and they run as the root user, it gives them maximum permissions in order to hide. Keyloggers record keystrokes and send them back to a remote location. They're normally used to try and obtain username and password information. Mass mailers turn the computer into a source of spam. Antivirus scanning detects and eliminates viruses in real time. The unit is capable of scanning multiple protocols for viruses. Depending on your model, it is also capable of scanning secure protocols like HTTPS. The unit also supports ICAP, which can be used to offload AV and content inspection to an ICAP server. Another aspect of virus scanning is heuristic virus detection. Heuristics are simply a list of virus-like attributes or behaviors that the scanner looks for. The hope is to detect a virus before it becomes an official signature and prevent an outbreak before it occurs. Detection will report the file as being suspicious. This is not actually a virus, but an indication that the file is dangerous in nature. These files are treated separately from a hit with virus or grayware scanning, so you can choose to block or allow them. Because of the nature of the detection, false positives can and will most likely occur. For example, OS updates can frequently perform dangerous functions like modifying the registry, so these are likely to get triggered by this. It can be enabled through the CLI. If your organization does not require this type of scanning, or you cannot afford the false positives, then you might want to consider disabling this feature. The behavior for heuristic scanning can only be configured from the CLI. There are 3 modes of operation. Disable turns it off. Then there are pass and block. Because a heuristic detection is not necessarily a virus and there's the possibility for a false positive, the action that will be taken is configured separately from normal virus scanning. With an action set to pass, you are enabling heuristic scanning but not blocking the file. The unit will make a log entry about detection. With block, anything that is detected by heuristic detection will get blocked. By comparison, grayware scanning only has 2 options, on and off. Unlike heuristic AV detection, there are no false positives. When a signature is detected, it's for a specific piece of grayware, the same as a virus. By default, this option is enabled, but it can be disabled if desired. The checkbox to have files sent to FortiGuard for sandboxing is pretty significant. Many everyday things can trigger heuristic AV scanning. Modification of the system information or registry. These kind of things are done all the time by installing software for totally legitimate reasons. A sandbox executes the file within a protected environment to see exactly what changes it makes and if those changes are dangerous. For example, 2 files could both alter the system registry and be flagged as suspicious. One might be a normal driver installation, while the other sets up a Trojan that starts connecting to a botnet. Sandboxing would reveal the difference. This information helps to detect zero-day vulnerabilities, which are unknown viruses, and provide data to the FortiGuard antivirus analysts so that they can quickly update the signature database. You can also block botnet connections with the AV profile. FortiGuard maintains an active list of known botnet IP addresses. If anything is detected trying to make a connection to one of those servers, it will be blocked. This list is maintained locally on the FortiGate and updates automatically with the normal FortiGuard AV IPS updates. In order to update, a valid contract is required. You can view the botnet database version and all the other database versions from the CLI using the command diag auto-update version. As its name implies, proxy-based scanning uses a proxy to deal with the communications. The proxy buffers the file for inspection during transmission. Obviously, this can cause a delay on files being sent, since the entire file needs to be buffered or the oversize limit has to be reached before the proxy will take any action. Once the file is completely buffered, the scan takes place and the connection is either used or the file is passed along. While this type of scanning can cause delays, it has a higher detection rate than other methods such as flow-based, which we will take a look at later. As part of the scan, the AV engine will try to walk through the code of the file. Comfort clients are set under the UTM proxy options in the AV profile. If enabled, while the file is being buffered, an unscanned stream of data will be sent to the client to prevent a timeout from occurring. Something that causes people a lot of confusion is the default oversize file limit. The simple fact is that most viruses are very small, so changing this value does not have as big an impact on security as people think. The default of 10 megabytes is set in order to achieve some of the device's certifications. In order to achieve 100% detection across all categories, you would need to be able to buffer and scan an infinitely large file. Seeing as all firewalls have limited memory capacity, that's not possible. As you can see though, The sweet spot for getting maximum detection for minimum cost is 3 or 4 megs. The fact of the matter is that you should set this value as high as you can without it causing problems, either on the device or for your network. Since proxy mode causes transmission delay, obviously the higher you set this, the more memory gets used, the higher the chance of a transmission timeout, and the more obvious this becomes to the user. Let's take a look at how proxy-based actually works. What happens internally is that data is buffered in memory until you get to the end of the file or reach the oversized limit. Once either one of these conditions is reached, you move on to the next step, which is the size check. Does it exceed the oversized limit? Let's assume the file is not larger than the oversized limit. The FortiGate has the entire file. Next, the FortiGate will check to see if the file is an archive, like a zip or something similar. If it finds the file to be an archive, it will attempt to decompress it. Since archives expand, there is a separate size limit on this, so the next check is to make sure the contents don't exceed the uncompressed size limit. If the contents of the archive are too large, then the file is blocked since it cannot be properly inspected. If the contents of the archive are not too large, then all of the contents are inspected by the next check. If there are multiple files within the archive, a single detection will cause the entire archive to be flagged. Likewise, if it was not an archive, the FortiGate moves on to the actual virus detection. If a virus is detected, it will cause the FortiGate to block the file. If it's clean, then the unit checks to see if grayware scanning is turned on. If it is, the file or archive contents will be checked for the existence of any known grayware. Just like virus scanning, if an infection is found, the FortiGate will block it. Next, the unit checks to see if heuristic scanning is turned on. Assuming it is not, then there has been no detection so far and the file passes. If it is, the unit will perform the heuristic scan, and if there's no detection, the file will pass through. Heuristic scanning has a configurable action, so if there is a detection, then exactly what happens will depend on how it has been configured to operate. To compare, let's look at proxy-based scanning when we don't have the entire file to work with, a file that is oversized. If the file is too big, the first thing that kicks in is the oversized action. It is set to block or pass. If it's blocked, the file is replaced with a block message. Without the entire file, the proxy can't decompress the file if it's an archive, and virus scan can't be performed. If the action is set to pass, then no virus scanning can be performed by the proxy and the file goes through. This is simply the full decision tree. It was split into two separate charts in order to make it a little easier to follow for the first time. Another option is flow-based scanning. Here, the files are scanned on a packet-by-packet basis. In this mode, there is no proxy involved, so you do not get the transmission delay that exists with the proxy-based method. It has a higher throughput for data, but the disadvantage is that it is less accurate. Proxy-based scanning buffers the whole file and scans through it, whereas flow-based scans packets in chunks. Some viruses attempt to hide themselves by splitting into pieces and/or jumping to different parts of the file. Obviously, if you are scanning in chunks, this kind of a virus could be undetectable. Flow-based is stateless, so each chunk is independent from the previous one. Flow-based scanning cannot act on the file as a whole, only on those small windows. The window of inspection is about 12K and is stateless. So if part of the information falls into one window and part in another, then there's no detection. Looking at flow-based virus scanning compared to proxy-based, the order of operations is much less exciting. The packet is normalized and scanned for viruses. Then, it is passed or not based on if there was a detection. The packet needs to be normalized in order to get at the real contents. The FortiGate will remove any tunneling or headers that it finds and reassemble the packet if it's fragmented. It's not possible for flow-based scanning to look for viruses in an archive. To decompress those, you need the whole file, and that's how the technology works. Flow-based scanning doesn't hold up traffic. Grayware is not a separate scan that can be turned on or off like proxy-based. The Flow database does include some of the grayware detections, but it's not a separately configurable scan like it is with proxy-based detection. Heuristic scanning is not an option because in order to look at the behavior of a file, you need the entire file. Most archives can be properly identified using the header details. However, proper decompression requires the entire file. This makes it impossible to do for oversized files. If the archive is protected with a password, it cannot be scanned because the FortiGate won't be able to decompress the file. The way it works is that the archive is simply unpacked and the contents are scanned with whatever AV options are enabled. Scanning with the nested archives is supported, that is, an archive within an archive up to 100 layers. The default is set at 12 and can be modified in the CLI for each inspected protocol. The more times the unit has to decompress the file, the more CPU that it will take. When you talk about virus scanning happening on a local computer, you don't have to consider a time limit. It takes as long as it takes to finish. On a firewall, the proxy is delaying packets, so you must take that into account when doing a virus scan. The FortiGate allows 30 seconds for a virus scan to complete from start to finish. If it takes longer than that, a watchdog process kicks in and stops the virus scan process and allows the traffic to pass. In terms of packets, 30 seconds is quite a long time, so it's possible that the session will already have timed out by this point. When this happens, an entry will go into the crash log saying that scan unit crashed with a signal 14. All the entry means is that 30 seconds passed and the virus scan could not complete. The crash log is discussed in our firewall policies module. Different FortiGate models have different types of databases available. All FortiGate devices have the regular AV database, which contains the common viruses that you will encounter. These are called in the wild, which are all the viruses detected in recent months and also the ones submitted by Fortinet users and partners. Some models support the extended AV database, which includes older viruses that were detected in the wild and moved out of the normal database. A small subset of models support Extreme AV, which contains all of the viruses available in desktop FortiClient software, including detection for legacy operating systems like DOS, Windows 3.1, Windows 95, etc. Another type of AV scanning is flow-based inspection, which is handled by the IPS engine. The larger the database used, the more of an impact on memory and the longer the scan can take. FortiGate applies smart update technology. Whenever it receives an update, only the databases that are actually being used will be updated. There are two ways of updating the virus definition databases. One is to download the definitions from the support website and then manually apply them. You can also let the device update automatically on a configured schedule. As the previous slide already stated, only the virus databases that you've configured the unit to use and apply to firewall policies will actually update. Even if your device has the capability of doing extreme virus scanning, if you have not configured the FortiGate to make use of it, the unit will not waste the time and resources to update it. Regardless of the FortiGate, the default is to scan using the regular database, which is designed to catch the most common in the wild viruses. Changing which database the proxy will use for scanning can be done from the CLI. Every FortiGate supports using the regular database. Despite all of these settings, a virus can still manage to get through. What can be done about this? You can do some checking. If it's something that is not in the virus database, the FortiGuard website will report it as being clean. At this point, you can submit the file directly to the Fortinet Virus Analyst team along with any additional information you may have. This way, the virus can be added to our definition by the team. If it is not clean, you will get a page that describes the virus. It'll show the settings that need to be enabled on the FortiGate in order to detect it. Here you can see the AV signatures from our database. As you can see, it's only part of the extended database for FortiClient. This means that unless you had a FortiGate capable of using extended AV scanning and had it enabled, there would be no way for the firewall to have detected this in traffic as it passed through. Virus scanning is enabled in the antivirus profile on a per protocol basis. The available options are organized by type, web, email, etc. Just check off the protocols to scan for traffic. The selection of protocols provided in the GUI is what can be inspected and varies by model and firmware. Older models are not capable of providing virus detection on encrypted protocols. Once you have created your profile, you enable it in your firewall policy in the Security Profile section. The on-off indicators show which UTM security profiles are enabled on the traffic passing through the policy. You may have noticed that the AV profile only has the unsecure versions of protocols listed: HTTP, but not HTTPS, SMTP, but not SMTPS. This is because your secure protocol settings are determined by an SSL inspection profile. When you enable UTM, regardless of it being flow or proxy-based, you must enable a UTM proxy option profile. This profile essentially tells the FortiGate which protocols to care about and what ports they use. There are some more advanced settings further down, but that is the basis of the profile: what to care about and where to look. If you want to enable the inspection of the secure version of the protocols, you also need to enable an SSL inspection profile. In this profile, you specify what certificate to use for the SSL traffic and what ports that traffic operates on. Without this profile in place, encrypted protocols will not be scanned. Here's a look at a virus detected log message. A lot of information, but the most important stuff is really straightforward. Like anything else, you don't need to block traffic when you run into something that triggers a UTM event, so you look at the status field to find out what action was taken. You can also click the link in order to find out detailed information about the virus that was detected. Now we're going to spend some time talking about memory usage. AV and other UTM features impact the available memory, more so than other features. What is conserve mode? Simply put, if the memory usage gets dangerously high, the FortiGate attempts to flush out various types of memory in order to free up resources. When running, everything on a FortiGate is stored in memory. If the memory level ever managed to hit 100%, this would wipe out your configuration. Our knowledge base is a good resource for different approaches and settings that can be adjusted. The FortiGate can enter in 3 kinds of conserve mode. Each one has slightly different causes and behavior. Kernel conserve is when the FortiGate's operating system runs out of memory to do its job. There's no set memory level for this, but it can be caused by things like too many files being opened by the processes, too much information on the stack, etc. System conserve mode indicates an overall lack of resources. This is when the overall memory usage level hits about 80%. Once it's been triggered, the unit will not exit until memory has dropped by 10% to around 70% usage. Proxy conserve is when the transparent UTM proxy runs out of connections. The maximum number of proxied connections varies by models. When it comes to the impact, system and proxy conserve mode have some configuration options that can be adjusted. With kernel conserve, the behavior is set and unconfigurable. AV-fail open is the CLI setting that controls the FortiGate's behavior in system conserve mode. Idle drop has the unit immediately drop the idle connections on the proxy in order to try and free up memory. New connections will continue to be inspected. This is dangerous because it may not free up enough memory to exit conserve mode, in which case memory could continue to climb. Off. If a new session has UTM inspection enabled, it will not pass through the FortiGate. One shot. New sessions will attempt UTM scanning. Pass. All new sessions with UTM inspection enabled will pass without any inspection. This is the default because new traffic continues uninterrupted and old traffic does not change behavior. Proxy conserve happens when the number of available connections on the transparent proxy drops to 0. In the case of proxy conserve mode, the behavior is decided by the CLI setting AV-fail open session. If this is set to enable, the unit will behave in the fashion dictated by the AV-fail open. The default is to block all further sessions until connections become available. Finally, there is kernel conserve mode. The FortiGate attempts to reclaim memory that is not in use. In an operating system, when a process releases memory, it is not immediately reclaimed. There is a memory daemon that runs periodically and cleans this up. The unit also immediately drops any connections that the proxy considers idle. While the unit is in this type of conserve mode, any new sessions will pass through the FortiGate without any UTM inspection because the operating system does not have enough memory to do so. Something important to point out is going to be the log behavior in the event of conserve mode. For kernel and system conserve mode, log messages are created at the time conserve mode is entered. However, since memory resources are limited, the logging process shuts down until after the unit has exited conserve mode. In these two instances, the logs saying that the unit has entered conserve mode will not show up until after the device has left conserve mode. Proxy conserve mode is not a lack of memory, so the log messages show up right away. This is expected behavior, and any device can run into high memory levels when you get down to it. It's important to make sure that you have proper monitoring of all the components vital to your network infrastructure. This could be things like SNMP, constant pings, etc. In order to help monitor and troubleshoot high memory levels, there are some useful diagnostic commands you should be aware of. Get System Performance Status is designed to give you an idea of how busy the device is. You get a look at the overall CPU level, the memory, as well as a summary of the amount of traffic passing through the device. A useful command for seeing if the unit is in system and or proxy conserve mode is diag hard sys SHM. SHM stands for shared memory. In the middle is a conserve mode indicator. Normally, this value will be 0, meaning it's fine. 1 would indicate the unit is in proxy conserve mode, 2 would be system, and 3 would be both. There's no indication on this diagnostic for kernel conserve mode because kernel conserve is happening at the operating system level. Due to the nature of kernel conserve mode, the diagnostic to detect its presence, aside from simply observing the behavior, is a little different and low level. In diag firewall IP rope state, if you look right at the beginning, there's an entry for AV_break. Much of the output of this command is dictated by the setting for AV_fail_open and AV_fail_open_session. But if the unit is currently in kernel conserve mode, off will show up beside pass. Another useful command is diag hardware sys_slab. This shows where the operating system is allocating its memory, how many objects of which type. It doesn't directly link back to any process, but it is designed to give you an idea of what the operating system is doing. Once you know what each slab is all about, it helps narrow down the possibilities quite quickly. The FortiGate runs on the Unix operating system, and this output comes straight from Unix. You can find out more information by simply searching for Unix slab using your favorite search engine. A lot of information is available to help you understand the output. Diag sys top summary is a useful command to take a look at the overall memory and CPU. It is similar to the diag sys top command. This command is more suited for looking at memory usage, whereas the top command is better for CPU. Now it's time for the labs. This lab will show you how to set up and test virus scanning on the FortiGate.